Hi, I'm Cindy Burflat with the Detroit Lakes Area League of Women Voters, and with me today I have Paula Quam. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
We're going to talk a little bit about freedom of the press, and I just want to remind everybody that League of Women Voters has a mission that is nonpartisan but policy driven, and our goal is to educate and provide opportunities for people to learn more about their civic responsibilities. So we're going to jump right in. First, Paula, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, my name is Paula Quam. I am an editorial director for Forum Communications. And so, we have different properties, newspapers for the most part, around this area in Lakes Country and Detroit Lakes, Perham, Wadena, and beyond, as well as a couple of TV stations within our region as well.
So you're sharing the news.
Yes, sharing the news.
So tell us a little bit about freedom of the press.
So freedom of the press came to us in much the same way as a lot of our freedoms did, and that is with a good dose of resentment, from the early American colonists coming from England, who didn't necessarily appreciate the way things were being run over there. Mm-hmm. One of them being the fact that England didn't have at that time a freedom of the press. Not a full freedom anyway. If the press were to criticize the crown, they could be jailed or accused of libel, even if it were true, and fined so heavily that they would have to shut their doors or be put in jail for not paying the fines. And so our founding fathers, when they were writing the Constitution, said, not here. And so they put our freedom of the press in the First Amendment, along with some other freedoms, such as freedom of speech, which is kind of the cousin to freedom of the press.
Right.
Although that's for individuals, this focuses on specifically the press, or as we would probably refer to it today as the media. The media. And so what that means is that journalists, photographers, podcasters, anybody working within, underneath the umbrella of journalism, can go out and dig around and ask the hard questions and demand transparency from our government and the officials who are elected to run our government without fear of retribution from our own government. We can report these things to the American people on a mass scale without fear that our own government will come after us in some way, even if what we're reporting is critical of them. Our founding fathers wanted to make sure that we kind of had that watchdog, for the American people, and that is the press. And I know we would all love to think that all of our elected leaders are always up in there doing the right thing, and there's nothing shady going on, nobody's lining their pockets, lying about anything, but obviously, we know that that's not always the case, and so, we want to make sure that with our freedom of the press, we're able to continue to sort of be watching for that sort of thing, and to hold those elected accountable, so that they don't get any bright ideas about doing things that they shouldn't be doing, because if they know they're being watched and being reported on, they're much more likely to stay in check. And so what that looks like here locally is being able to open up a newspaper or log on or turn on a local radio station or local TV station and hear our local journalists here talking about what's happening. You'll see us at city council meetings, county board meetings, school board meetings, finding out what's going on, what decisions are being made, what programs are happening, and where the money's going, who's doing what, and maybe putting in a freedom of information request to try to dig for more information of what's happening kind of behind the scenes with our elected leaders. And so, locally, that's how we enjoy our freedom of the press. There are things we can't do, though. While we have this freedom, just like freedom of speech, you can't just say anything. It's the same for the press. We can't print anything we want to simply because it's we're thinking it's going to sound good. We can't go in and report on top secret things that could be detrimental or harmful to the country, or put our troops at risk as they're out doing missions, things like that. We can't invade people's privacy in an extreme way, going onto their private property and, you know, recording them or wiretapping them or, you know, taking photos of them. We can't print things that are libelous. You know, if we know something is not true, we can't just go out and report it. There's, you know, a little bit of allowance for making mistakes, obviously, and that happens, you know, all the time. There are mistakes made. We are human, and we may have bad sources. There may be bad apples within, you know, journalism. And so, yeah, that happens, but we can't go out there and knowingly, you know, put information out there that is false. So, and there's a lot of criticism that happens, you know, among or
why
towards,
did you choose that story?
Right. Yes. Or you know when there are obvious biases and things like that, and that's good. That's good that there is you know, a healthy amount of criticism against journalists as well, because we like to shine the light on others and keep them accountable. So it's good that, you know, the public keeps us accountable as well. But I think where it can get dangerous is when if there's a vitriol, you know, towards journalists simply for being journalists, simply because that's the job that they're doing. Because, you know, I know that, you know, one of the questions that you guys sometimes ask is, what would this country look like if we didn't have this freedom?
Correct.
And that is one that I obviously think about more than the normal person, but, you know, to think about that, all you have to do is think about the places that don't have freedom of the press. You know, China, Iran, Iraq, North Korea, Russia. Those are places where their citizens, when they're opening up the newspaper or they're, you know, listening to their TV and radio broadcasters, their journalists talk, they get a sanitized version of the news. They only hear what the government wants them to hear. And that can get very dark very fast. You know, thinking about, I think what is probably the most extreme example of that is prior to World War II in Germany. You know, they only heard what their government wanted them to hear, and soon there became a warped sense of reality. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow burn that is a bending of the mind according to whoever happens to be in the government at that time. And so I think that although that's obviously an extreme example, there's a lot of space in between that and a full freedom of the press, and a lot of, you know, room in between for some pretty, you know, bad things to happen. And they do in these other countries. And so I think that if anyone were ever wondering, you know, should we be defending the press against, you know, our own government, you know, if you're ever hearing a government official suggesting that things should be run by them first before there's access, you know, for journalists to have, you know, access to information, or if there's, you know, when there gets to be harassment of in terms of lawsuits and things like that, that's when red flags should go up like crazy, you know.
I agree.
And so I kind of wanted to leave you with a quote. And this is from an author that it may have nothing to do with, you know, journalism when she wrote it, but to me it kind of resonates, you know, in this situation. So it's from author Veronica Roth, and she wrote, "When you control information or manipulate it, you don't need force to keep people under your thumb. They stay there willingly." And I think that when, you know, thinking about freedom of the press, we need to think about what could be. And even when we don't love every journalist in the world, we need to love the idea of it and protect it fiercely.
Well said. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today. I want to do a shout out to West Central Initiative and the VFW for their sponsorship with this programming as well.